Moving on to our third statement, and you both started touching on it a little bit during the first one, so I was like, don't talk about this too much. But so here's the last one. Familiar for both of you as well, because Suzanne, we talked about it in the podcast, and Virgil, you know this topic as well. Anyhow, the third theme is around pay transparency. On the 24th of April of this year, the European Council has adopted new rules on pay transparency. Under these new rules, EU companies will be required, among other things, to share information on salaries and take action if their gender pay gap exceeds 5%. In the US, as Suzanne mentioned, 8 states and 6 local areas require pay transparency. And while the vast majority of states do not yet require pay transparency, many employers are seeing it as a trend. Among more than 1,300 HR practitioners surveyed, 42% of their organizations are required by state or local laws to include pay ranges in their job postings, according to SHRM data released on March 14, 2023. The survey also shows that more than 2 in 3 HR professionals say that even when pay transparency is not required by law, their organizations still tend to list starting pay in job postings, something that may signal that companies anticipate that pay transparency laws will spread. But how come that companies aren't simply being transparent about their salary policies? Why does money still seem to be a topic that we aren't supposed to talk about? And will this legislation actually lead to more transparency? Interesting questions that bring me to our final statement. Companies are not ready for the pay transparency era. They have too many skeletons in the closet. Suzanne, what do you vote?
Yes, they do.
Virgil, what do you vote?
I wish I could disagree with Suzanne for once, but yes, 100%.
I know we're not 100%. Doing a good job of debating it, Ailey. We agree too much. But this time I'm just going to be like, you're wrong. Oh, wait, you just agreed with me. You're right.
All right. Well, Suzanne, let's hear it. Companies are not ready for the pay transparency era. They have too many skeletons in the closet. Why is that?
Well, part of it is simply that they all need to buy Virgil's product, right? Because, do I get points for that one?
Yes.
Because they don't know how to do compensation. They don't. And they don't know how to do salary surveys, or they don't know how to look at things. And the problem with salary surveys is also that they're in the past, and with inflation, it's just crazy. But then also we've had a lot of tech layoffs, but then we can't hire for retail, hospitality, hospitals. They can't hire to save their souls. There's not enough people out there for them. So it's all this weird stuff going on. And companies aren't ready to be honest and open about that, partly because they don't know. There are definitely small businesses that are like, oh, I need to hire a CFO, but I have no idea how much to pay. So I'm going to post my job description and then hope that people apply and that they tell me. That's seriously the compensation thing that some of these small businesses are taking. And then in some big companies, you have all these compensation people and everything has to be signed off. And then there's not enough flexibility. And they're like, well, we've posted this job. It's been up for 6 months. We can't find anybody willing to take our crappy salary. So there's just incompetence. But also, I mean, from an American perspective and a Swiss perspective, we don't talk about money. And I am an avid reader of advice columns. I love them. And there's always people writing in that are like, I've been married for 10 years and I don't know how much my husband makes. And it's like, if we can't talk to our spouses about our paychecks, we're not ready to talk about it with our neighbor. I have no idea how much money my neighbors make. And that would be so weird for me to ask. Yeah. You know, we're down in the laundry room together. Oh, so Olivia, how much money do you make? I mean, so culturally, we're not ready to talk about it with our friends. I don't know how much money any of my friends make. It doesn't come up. And then businesses, the people running businesses have those same things, and add to it incompetence and add to it the skeletons. We've been really underpaying these people. Shh, we don't want to tell them.
Yeah. All right, so now we've got the American slash Swiss perspective and the money hasn't been talked about. So now I'm very curious, of course, to hear what's that like in France, Virgile.
So besides France, I think all over the world, I agree with Suzanne that the reason why I call this company Figures is because, the link between figures as a pure number and the fact that figures represent numbers behind it, like it has a meaning in French, it has a meaning in English around something that represents human, right? And the fact that salaries aren't just numbers. There's people behind it with all their expectation, jealousy, fears, hope of recognition. So salary is a very, very tricky topic. They're not just numbers, right? So that was the purpose for why figures as a name was this tricky relationship of those not being only numbers. So pay transparency companies are not ready because of incompetence. Suzanne said that. And because historically, there hasn't been any incentive for companies to be transparent. I mean, they use their asymmetry of information. So a company has way more information about someone's worth, the market, what they're paying people compared to candidates and employees, and they use it to their advantage. They use it to pay people less than people could ask for. They use it to bury inequality under the carpet and so on. And therefore, this has been the norm for decades. And so no, most companies are not ready, especially the largest one that have been hiding inequalities and unfairness for decades, and those that will take the most time to adapt to this new paradigm. Because this is a new era, right? I think there's a new era for compensation, the pay transparency era, in which compensation we're going to get out of the black box era where employees, they don't know if they're paid fairly compared to the market because they don't really have access to market information. They will with salary ranges information popping up on job ads. They don't have any information whether or not they're paid well compared to their peers in the company. They will because pay transparency directives state that every employee will be able to request to their company, how am I getting paid compared to my peers? And companies will be mandated to answer. And is my company paying fairly? Remember the first question. This has the biggest impact on employee motivation. Am I treated fairly? Company will have to report on the gender pay gap and so on. So this is a new shift, a new era, and most companies, especially the largest one, are not ready, which is interesting because right now at this moment, what are the companies reaching out to us figures the most is the largest companies. The one that are scared, they're like, okay, we have 3 years to get ready. We have 3 years to start reviewing our ranges, fixing our internal inequality before we have to be more transparent. And they're taking action now because they know it's going to be more than a 3 years project. The largest companies are the ones that are the most scared of this new era. Yet, and I'll end on this, there's a window of opportunities for early adopters of pay transparency right now. The one that will adapt the quickest, that will start to be more proactive on being transparent on salary ranges, proactive about reporting on their gender pay gap and so on. They will benefit from it from an employer branding purpose, right? Those that will adapt before they're mandated by law to adapt, I think those one will win the war on talent in the next year or two, because then it will become the norm.
I have two things here, yes, to perhaps spark a bit more of a debate anyhow. So the first thing that I'm wondering, and this is an actual thing that I'm wondering about, is like, how much is this actually going to change, right? All this legislation. We already had the example at the start of our session today that Suzanne gave that, yes, of course, as a company, I'm going to be obliged to publish a pay range. But if I say the pay range is somewhere between $1 or maybe a Swiss franc or a euro and like 1.5 million euros, then obviously, officially, I have published my pay range, but people still don't know at all what to expect. And this is just maybe a bit of a silly example, but to what extent can we expect companies just finding ways around the legislation that is coming? So any thoughts?
The legislation in California requires a good faith posting, and that hasn't been tested yet. Nobody's sued over it, and that's how the United States work. We have laws, and then they go through the courts, and they get refined in the courts. And so clearly a €1 to 1.5 million is not a good faith salary range. And so I think that's going to stop because of the nature of the laws. But there's also nothing to stop a company from posting 4 different jobs that are really the same position that they're hiring with 4 different ranges. And then depending on who they want, hiring into whatever range they want. There's always a way around. I mean, that's how we end up with, the wonderful corruption that is in the US government. That's a different podcast. Anyway, because there's always loopholes. And there are going to be companies that do that. But I see more and more people not putting up with it. More and more people are hanging up on recruiters, are not responding. If you won't tell me what the range is, I'm not going to take that 15-minute call with you. I'm just not. And I'm not the only person. And I mean, this is how I operate my business. When people reach out to me, can you write an article, blah, blah, blah. I will say, this is how much I charge. Take it or leave it. Or you can always pay me more. I'm always happy to take more money, but I'm not going to go below. So, and people are like that. So you're going to have to tell me how much this job is going to offer me before I'm willing to come in.
And I think on this one, this is the most important point. In a lot of areas on which there'll be a war on talent, like for example, tech, once again, the pressure on company won't come from laws and laws that will pressure them into slower salary ranges. It will come from market standards, right? If you look at Netflix, you can go at Netflix career page. They do the list every role, like from 30K to 600K. They still do that, but they're Netflix. And the more we progress, the more companies that don't have Netflix employer brand or cash or compensation practices, they won't be able to sustain that, because if other companies start playing by the rules, those that don't, they won't get the talent they need. And I think they will adapt very quickly. So in most areas in which there's a lack of talent, it won't be law that pushes them to be fair when it comes to publishing salary ranges. It'll be market practices and employer branding, I believe.
I fully agree with Virgil. That's what's going to do it. It's going to be market, the laws, people will try to get around them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if a big company starts publishing on their website, like, this is it, this is how much we're paying all these people, then I'm going to be like, hey, well, so you're offering me this, but I can see that this company is paying this for the same role. That's what I want.
Yes, I also fully agree. Unfortunately, I fully agree with that. I think that if the change is going to come, it will come from the market and from the people that are willing or not to start working for a company. And I do not really believe in the legislation being the driving force of the change. That's one thing. The other thing I was wondering about though here is, how much do I personally care about pay transparency? How much do I care about how much my colleague is being paid? As long as I have the feeling that what I'm getting paid is fair, as Virgile mentioned a couple of times, and I'm fully satisfied with that. How much do I then, as an employee, actually still care about how much my peers are getting paid? That's another thought I wanted to share. Yeah, I see some reactions. Virgile first.
I wish that was true. Right? I wish that was true, and people would be like, you know what? As long as I'm being paid fairly, I don't care about what my peers are making. I think it's human nature to just look around, and you know what? In fact, that has happened to me, and I think Suzanne the same many times in my HR life. People are like, yep, that's a fair package. I'm super happy with it. It's even better than what I would have hoped. Then they learn that their colleague is making 1K more or 200 euros more per year. They're not happy. So I think there's a way, this is what makes compensation and the link between people's expectation and compensation and the emotions behind it very, very tricky.
This is why companies don't want to talk pay, because Nayli's very happy at whatever she's making. But now you find out that your coworker, Virgil, is making 20,000 euros more a year than you. And you're a better employee than he is, right? And you're like, now you're unhappy because you were fine with what your salary is before, but now you find out that someone else is making more and now you're unhappy. And companies know that. And that's why they don't want you to talk about your salary, because they're not the same. And from an HR, from a compensation standpoint, I can probably explain to you why your salaries are different. And there's probably a perfectly legal reason for that. Right? You know, we have a grid or whatever. And when we brought this person in and that person in, they have a master's degree, you have a bachelor's degree, they get the 10,000 bump for the master's degree. You had 5 years of experience, they had 10. That's why another 10,000 bump. That's why they're making 20,000 more than you. But you don't see all of that work behind. You just see, hey, we come in. And also, people are terrible at judging their own performance and judging the performance of their coworkers. Like, I don't see you do anything. Why are you making so much money? Well, because what they do isn't what you do, and you're not in the same meetings, you don't have the same deliverables. And we also have that whole, well, I don't know how much that can't be worth anything. Like, her job is so easy. I mean, she does podcasts. Like, she talks. why are we paying her so much money? And in the meantime, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so stressed out. I've got to do this. I've got to do this. I've got to come up, I've got to write the script. I've got to do the editing. I don't know how much you do with it. But you know all the aspects of your job. I don't know all the aspects of your job. To me, I'm like, gosh, she talks. Why are we paying her? I don't think that at all, actually, because let's be fair, I make most of my income from talking. So talking is very important. But people see that, and so they can't wrap their little brains around it. So with more salary transparency, we have to have more transparency as to what we're doing. Mm-hmm. And when we start to understand someone else's job, then it becomes clear, oh my gosh, I wouldn't want to do the work that Nayli does. Like, finding people to be on this is a pain in the neck. That's, and doing all the research, because like you did all this research for these questions, right? That was a lot of work. But some people may not recognize that. So they're like, why does she make so much money? It's just, there's all of these things that we don't get as individuals, and it's going to be difficult. But there's also plenty of organizations that publish their things. If you work in a U.S. government job, I can Google your salary. If you work for a U.S. university, I can just Google and it'll tell me your name and your salary. And the world hasn't ended. Is it Finland that posts everybody's every year or something? I think it's Finland.
Sweden, you can request to know your neighbor's taxable income.
Yeah.
Only your neighbor will know that you did, but you can.
See, and has the world fallen apart?
Doesn't seem like it.
Not yet. So the panicking is, would I do that if I lived there? I'm so nosy. I don't think I would, because they would know I did.
All right. I think with that, we've come to the end, basically, of this beautiful session with various very heated debates, or maybe a little bit less heated. But I want to thank both of you very much. I really, I'm very grateful that you both wanted to be here. So thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, Virgile.
Thanks for having us. Sorry we didn't disagree.
Yeah, sorry we didn't. Yeah, we should have disagreed more, right? That's disappointment number one. Disappointment number two, I don't have my nickname yet.
Oh,
Suzanne.
Oh, yes. Okay. So we need a nickname. I'm going to have to come up with one. I'm going to ask ChatGPT when we get off for a nickname.
That's fine.
That sounds like a great idea. And perhaps we'll do this another time in the future. And then maybe you can disagree on something. Who knows? Anyhow, thank you very much. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this episode of HR Debatable. I hope you enjoyed it, and to see you soon for another episode. Thank you and goodbye.